Prepare to see assault and battery without the battery part. It's Todd Friel, boing! And I with my levitational power. So if you're here today and you thought, I can't be forgiven, I'm too bad of a sinner, you don't know how good of a Savior Jesus is. No matter who you are, no matter what you have done, where sin did abound, grace abounds that much more. Hello, and welcome to Wretched. My name is Todd Friel. I am your host. The wretch the song refers to. If an argument can be assaulted, Scott Klusendorf should be arrested for assault without the battery part. Recently, the host of our pro-life series, Life is Best, had a little debate at a university campus with the former president of the ACLU, Nadine Strossen. The issue, life. The issue, abortion. And Nadine Strossen did her level best to present her argument. And each time she did, this was just a smackdown.
I'll cite one bioethics in the new embryology book by three authors who conclude, science does not offer a hard and fast answer to the question of when human life begins, and there is no consensus among scientists' opinions.
Nadine also argued there's no consensus on when life begins. Men and women, this is utterly fallacious. How does it follow that because people disagree, there's no right answer? By the way, if disagreement means no truth, Nadine's position is falsified because I disagree with it, and so do a whole lot of other people. The reality is people once disagreed on whether slaves ought to have rights. It didn't mean there wasn't a right answer. They once disagreed on whether women should have the right to vote. It didn't mean there wasn't a right answer. Hadley Arkes puts it well. The absence of consensus does not mean an absence of truth.
Sure, there are a few scientists who would say there is no consensus about when life begins. Nevertheless, the majority of scientists do agree life begins at conception. Nevertheless, as Scott just pointed out, to argue that we should be allowed to kill a baby in the womb because we're not exactly sure is fallacious. So too was this. Hold on, I'm just going to prepare for this. Okay, go ahead, Scott.
Scientists estimate that 55 to 65% of all conceptions are spontaneously aborted in the first few days or weeks of a pregnancy, usually without the woman ever knowing that she was pregnant. It's called fetal wastage. Another 10 to 15% of pregnancies are miscarried in the months to come. Fetal wastage occurs because early embryonic forms have a high defect rate. Most early miscarriages are caused by genetic defects in the fertilized egg. This shows that eggs and embryos do not yet qualify as human beings according to nature herself. At best, they represent tryouts for the human race and personhood.
She also said that miscarriage defeats my view. Really? How does it follow that because nature spontaneously triggers a miscarriage, that A, the embryos in question are not fully human, or B, we may intentionally kill them? Many countries, like India, have horrendous high infant mortality rates. Children die before a month old after being born. Does it follow those who die sooner are less human and valuable than those who die later? Earthquakes happen in third world countries and kill hundreds of thousands. Does that justify mass murder?
Hold on. You might want to protect your kidneys next.
Blackman was a devout Methodist. He took his beliefs very seriously. He was also a devout student of science and medicine. He had been legal counsel for the Mayo Clinic in his native Minnesota before he was appointed to the Supreme Court. And he spent the entire summer after Roe versus Wade was argued in the libraries at the Mayo Clinic, researching deeply into medicine, into embryology, into all the information that science as well as philosophy could provide before he reached the conclusion, which has been consistently reaffirmed not only by the Supreme Court on restudy, but also by briefs that are filed in every Supreme Court case on abortion, including the most recent one that the court decided this last spring, briefs by scientists, by doctors, by medical ethicists, by Nobel Prize winners, by embryologists, all saying the disciplines of medicine, philosophy, and theology are unable to arrive at any consensus as to when life begins.
If we don't know if the unborn are human, should we be killing them? If you're driving home from tonight's debate and you see what looks like an old coat in the road, but it could be an old man who had a little bit too much to drink, are you going to run the coat over? No, you're going to err on the side of caution. Or to borrow an example from former President Ronald Wilson Reagan, if you're out hunting and you see bushes rustling in front of you and you don't know if it's that deer you've been after or your best buddy, are you going to open fire? Not unless you're Dick Cheney, right? You're going to err on the side of caution. There's no way you're going to open fire. If we don't know if the unborn are human, we shouldn't be killing them.
Here's what we're going to do. We will take a break, and you are going to get some ice so that you can place it on the bruises of the pro-choice arguments. Next on Wretched.
The unborn is a living, distinct, whole human being.
I'm glad my mother did not go to Hillary Clinton for prenatal counseling.
Imagine criminals invading the womb of the mother.
Abortion is murder.
Prepare to save lives, save souls, and defend human life.
And now the battle goes toe to toe. Welcome back to Wretched, in an effort to equip you to defend the life issue during Pro-Life Month. Sharing with you a debate, Scott Klusendorf, the host of Life is Best, wretched.tv/life. He debated Nadine Strawson, the former president of the ACLU. She did her opening remarks. Scott gave his opening remarks. Then they were able to respond to each other's remarks. Then, sitting at a table, they went toe to toe.
Scott, my first question for you is, would you absolutely oppose abortion in every circumstance, including when it's necessary to save a woman's life, when it's necessary for her health, when she is the victim of rape or incest being the most common examples where
Sure.
many pro-lifers make exceptions?
Yeah, fair question. Let me take the first one, her life. There are medical cases known as ectopic pregnancy where the embryo implants on the inner wall of the fallopian tube. If you do not remove that embryo, as that embryo grows in that narrow tube, the danger to the mother is clear. That embryo grows, the tube bursts, the mother hemorrhages to death. You're a pro-life doctor. What are you going to do? Do you do nothing and let two humans die? Or do you act in such a way that you save one life even though the unintended but foreseen result is the death of the human embryo? And my answer, Nadine, is we act to save the mother. Now, here's where I need to get back to definitions. You'll notice in my syllogism, I defined abortion very carefully. The intentional killing of an innocent human being. When a doctor acts to save a mother's life, he is not intentionally killing an innocent human being. He can foresee the death of the embryo in the case of ectopic pregnancy, but he does not intend it. So I don't even call that abortion. That's a life-saving surgery that any physician who's pro-life would do, and no legislation has ever forbid that kind of surgery.
That is a clear articulation of a very reasonable, however overblown question. What about the life of the mother? If the baby in the womb could lead to the death of the mother, would you not be in favor of abortion then? Number one, there are very few instances. Scott, to the best of my knowledge, mentioned the only medical issue I'm aware of that does indeed threaten the life of the mother, and it is a very rare situation. However, we need to articulate our position based on the definition of abortion. If, in the saving of the mother's life, the baby's life is lost, we mourn that death, but we did not perform an abortion. Why? Because abortion is the intentional taking of an innocent human life. And in those rare instances where the mother's life is indeed threatened, we still don't perform abortions. We perform life-saving measures. Toe-to-toe they go, Nadine doing her best to assault the pro-life argument. This is a new one. This is one I maybe haven't heard for quite a while. Hey, you couldn't possibly be for abortion if the pregnancy causes the woman to henceforth become infertile, would ya?
Let's assume hypothetically
Okay.
That let's say she will not lose her life, but she will be rendered infertile. Let's use that as an example
Sure.
of an adverse health consequence.
Right.
Would that be a situation where you would say the pregnancy could be terminated?
In that case, the mother stands to lose one good. The child stands to lose an ultimate good. The mother loses fertility. The child loses its life. Being killed is immeasurably worse than losing your fertility.
Let us be as clear as Scott just was, and let us do it very sensitively. If a woman is rendered infertile because she delivered her child, that is something we mourn. That is a sad event. But that does not justify the intentional taking of an innocent human life. Nadine Strawson now reaches back into her pro-choice quiver of arguments to fire the big gotcha. Hey, what about in the cases of rape and incest?
And rape and incest?
Yeah, thank you. Here's the question. You and I both agree that a woman who has been sexually assaulted has suffered a terrible injustice. We both agree on that. My guess is we disagree on the solution. So here's the question that comes to mind. How should a civil society treat innocent human beings who remind us of a painful event? Is it okay to kill them so we can feel better? We're back to the question, what is the unborn? Does hardship justify homicide? If I have a 2-year-old in front of me and his father was a rapist, would it be okay to execute the 2-year-old for the sin of his father? I think we'd all say no. Which means if the unborn are human, like that toddler, we shouldn't kill them in the name of hardship any more than we would kill the toddler for that reason. Now, having said that, I want to make it clear that my answer may not feel good to me because I can easily sympathize with that woman that I can see right in front of me. It's easy. I can see her. I can sympathize with her. It's harder for me to sympathize with her child, but I can't trample on the rights of that child without also putting in jeopardy the very foundation that gives any of us value and a right to life, namely that we shouldn't be killed just because someone would feel better if we were dead.
Not sure, but I don't think Scott was pausing for effect. He was waiting for a response to those penetrating questions, and he got none. If'n you have seen this here 13-episode TV series with workbook to equip you to be as articulate as Scott Klusendorf, you know precisely what he did just there, don't ya? That's right, he trotted out the toddler. The next time somebody tries to justify the intentional taking of an innocent human life because of its location in the mother's womb, just trot out your 2-year-old and apply the same logic. Does that justify the killing of this child too? And they, like Nadine, will be gobsmacked smacked. Nadine Strawson, she's not going down without a fight, however. She has got one more little shot to take, even though she doesn't actually shoot straight with the truth of late-term abortion.
Every single medical organization, including the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the Public Health Association, every single one of them filed briefs in support of the medical life-saving necessity of this procedure in certain tragic pregnancies. They occur extremely rarely. These are all wanted pregnancies, and some tragic complication develops late in the process, as a result of which women make a very painful
I've actually got the Journal of the American Medical Association brief here on partial birth abortion, and the doctors make it very clear that this procedure is not needed to save the mother's life. And why would it be? It's a 3-day procedure. The woman goes in, has laminaria inserted, you got to wait a day, then they've got to dilate the cervix slowly, then deliver the child breech first, and with only the head left in the birth canal, stab it in the back of the skull and vacuum its brains out. If this were an emergency life-saving procedure, they'd do a quick D&E. They wouldn't use a procedure that takes 3 days, Nadine.
Well, then, somebody got busted. It's good to be prepared for a debate. Did you also notice what Nadine Strawson said that was inconsistent with her own position? She talked about late-term abortion as being a tragic thing. Why? If what is inside of the mother's womb is no different than a mole on a woman's cheek, she doesn't mourn the loss of a mole. She doesn't mourn the loss of a blob of tissue. Why would she mourn the loss of an innocent, whole human being? Because it's an innocent, whole human being. When we return, Scott Klusendorf now goes toe-to-toe with the audience. Next on Wretched.
The unborn is a living, distinct, whole human being.
I'm glad my mother did not go to Hillary Clinton for prenatal counseling.
Imagine criminals invading the womb of the mother.
Abortion is murder.
Prepare to save lives, save souls, and defend human life.
Welcome back to Wretched. Scott Klusendorf, a pro-life apologist, debating Nadine Strawson, a pro-choice activist. The audience now is allowed to go to the open microphone, and this fellow brings a very penetrating question to Nadine Strawson, and you are now going to see the deficiency of the pro-choice argument.
What is the essential difference made in 1854 by Chief Justice Roger Taney, himself a slave owner, when he argued for the non-personhood of people of African descent? That was his argument, at least that's my understanding of it. What is the difference between that and the non-personhood argument put forth by the abortionists today? Thank you for answering my question.
Because one has been born and the other is far from birth.
Okay.
That response is question-begging, because the very issue is, why does birth matter? In other words, how does a change of location from inside the womb to outside the womb change the essential nature of the unborn? Nadine needs to argue for how that happens, and she hasn't done it. She just asserts it. I could just as easily assert that having a belly button that points out rather than in is what gives us value. And I would be no less arbitrary and ad hoc than she is tonight. You've got to argue why birth matters. But here's another problem for Nadine. At the University of San Francisco Medical Center, Dr. Michael Harrison is doing surgery on fetuses where he repairs herniated diaphragms. And here's how he does it. He removes the child at somewhere between 20 to 24 weeks from the womb, almost all the way out, surgically repairs the herniated diaphragm and places the child back in the womb. If birth is what gives us value, what happens to that child? Does it go from being a non-human to a human briefly and then back to being a non-human again? This is the absurdity of the position we're hearing tonight. Men and women, please get this. If our rights are grounded on things that we don't share equally and that may come and go in the course of our lifetimes, you have no human equality.
Reminder to self on my imaginary cell phone to send me a text reminding me to send an email to Scott Glusendorf warning him he was dangerously close to assault and battery. There wasn't he. I type really fast with my thumbs. Oh, that was a smackdown, and it was perhaps, I think it's safe to say, the first belly button illustration given ever by anyone in any context. What's the difference between a black slave in the 1800s who was not esteemed as a person and a child in the womb of his or her mother? Nadine Strawson gave an entirely arbitrary and very deficient response. Well, one is born and the other one isn't. So, what does that demonstrate? She's writing her own rules to enforce her own rules to make the argument that she prefers. And that distinction between one is born and one is not born is no less arbitrary than saying somebody has value because they have an innie versus an outie, which, let's be honest, innies are better than outies. But the point is, that's an arbitrary distinction. What makes a person worthy of personhood? I could argue because, well, they do math better. They remember more history. They part their hair on the left side. How does that make somebody a person and somebody not a person? It doesn't, and so too does the arbitrary distinction between born and unborn not make the case. It merely begs it. Until tomorrow, go serve your king.